Now let's look at some of the screens and programming. Now to go to the model list, press the menu button, long press of the menu button, and then we get the list of all the different models. At the moment I have a basic model programmed in, which is separate ailerons on channels 1 and 2, throttle on channel 3, elevator on channel 4, rudder on channel 5. I've also got a discus launch glider programmed in. That's screen 1 of 8 on this particular version of OpenTX. So we're on the basic model. If we go minus, we'll step through the different screens. First is the name of the model, and by pushing the menu button you can actually edit the name. The timer, press the menu button to edit it. So you can choose absolute, which is just the way I've got it, just counts the time that the radio has been turned on. You can turn it off. Throttle start, which is what I've got. The timer starts when you activate the throttle. Throttle percentage, it gives the percentage of full throttle. So if you're only using half throttle, it will only count at half the pace. And throttle trace, I'll have to think about that, I'm not too sure. And then you can start the timers with all the different switches on the radio as well. If you enter a time in this section here, it will count down from that time instead of just counting. So if you know your battery will last for 10 minutes, you can set a 10-minute timer, and the timer will count down from 10 minutes and will start beeping when it gets to 0 to remind you to stop and change battery. Alright, so you can have minute beeps, you can have a countdown for the last minute, and on the second timer I've got the throttle start setting. If you tick this box, it extends the limits, it gives you extended limits of movements for the servos, and this one extends the trims. Little buttons here, it means you can trim it right out beyond the end. I've never used those. Trim step, you can have extra fine, exponential, fine, medium or coarse steps for each click of the trim button. I tend to have it on medium or coarse. Throttle reverse, I don't know why you'd use that. T-source, that is used in the timers, that says that the source to activate that switch is the throttle lever. Throttle trim, throttle warning, throttle trim, I think that's more for gas motors and setting idle. Throttle warning, if that is ticked, you'll get that warning on startup that the throttle isn't in the 0 position, and same for all the switches, which is a good idea. Center beep doesn't actually work on this radio for some reason, and protocol, I wouldn't touch those things. Alright, so next screen is the sticks screen. Now with programming the radio, you sort of have an input screen, a mixer screen and an output screen, and this sticks is called sticks in this version. It's called input in later versions. With this screen you sort of modify the behaviour of the sticks. For example, you most likely do the aileron stick. With a long press of the menu you can edit it. So now for the aileron stick, this is the stick we're talking about, nothing else. The weight is 100, which means you're using 100% of the value that the stick provides. Expo means that you can see that curve has a little bit of a curve in it. If we muck around with that expo, we increase the expo, you can see this is like the input-output curve. Higher expo gives you a softer feel around the centre of movement of the stick. And go back to 0, it's just a linear input-output. So 10% movement of the stick gives you 10% output from the stick. It's normal to start off with about 30% expo. It just gives sort of a softer control around the centre of movement of the stick, which is what you're using most of the time. But you can use 100% of the movement. If we change the weight, then you can reduce the actual limit of movement. You're only using 70% here. And you can also assign that to a switch. so you can switch that effect on and off. And you can also limit it to one side or the other as well. Now all this stuff you can do in the mixer page as well. This is where it gets a bit confusing because I tend to do most of my stuff in this page here. So this is where you assign sticks to channels, and I have decided that aileron, the right aileron, will be on channel 1. And again, this is a weight reading, so you can reduce the rate if you want to, if you want less movement of the aileron. Left aileron is on channel 2, throttle is on channel 3, elevator channel 4, rudder on channel 5. Mixing is a whole subject in itself, so I'll move on to the next one. Oops, I'm changing the weight. There we go. So this is the output page, or this is called the servos in this version, and in this screen you can change the midpoint and the endpoints and the and invert the movement of the servo. And if you have dialed in some trims, then that will be reflected in these values on this screen here. So this is the aileron. If you find that the right aileron is working in the wrong direction, then you can arrow over to this last line here, push the menu button, and it inverts it, and that switches the direction of travel of the servo. So this is a necessary screen. You find your servos are moving too far and straining against the foam or something, you can reduce the travel, reduce the maximum travel of that channel or servo. Okay, next screen is curves, and you saw that curve before with the Expo. Well, here you can invent your own curves, which is useful for things like flaps or brakes or things like that, but I'll go into that later on. Very powerful. Next one is custom switches. Now here you can set up, other than the physical switches, you can set up logical switches that are activated when a certain set of circumstances are met. Things like one value is greater than another value that you specify, then the switch will be on and you'll be able to use that switch in programming. That's pretty advanced stuff, we don't really need that. The last screen is custom functions, and there are some really funky things you can do in here, and this is a standard one that I use, and this is the throttle safety switch using the rudder switch, which is the top left front switch. So this line says it's the rudder switch with an exclamation mark in front of it, which means when the rudder switch is not on, we've activated the safety on channel 3, which is the throttle, and the safety parameter is send it to -100, which means 0 throttle, and tick to activate it. So that basically means that unless the rudder switch is on, the throttle won't be activated. In the timer screen that we have here, a short press of exit will zero the throttle timer switch, and a long press of exit will zero both of them. So we'll go in and do some editing with this basic model. So page through to the what do we do? Mixer page. All right. So what I'm going to do is mix in a bit of rudder with the ailerons to help with smooth coordinated turns. Now the logic is the rudder is channel 5, so we want to operate the rudder partially with the aileron stick. So I'll go down to rudder, press menu to select that line and push the down to copy that line. Now if you push it down again, you'll copy it to the next channel, but we want to just add it to this channel 5 line. Press menu to accept that. Now press menu again and long press, and we'll go in and edit that line. So the source at the moment is the rudder stick. We want to change that to the aileron stick. Press menu to get it editable, and then just go through until you find the aileron. There you go. Now we won't want the aileron to be operating the rudder 100%. We'll drop that down to, say, 20%. And you would just have to fly that and see if it's working nicely. You can change it later on. Now switch, we want to switch that effect on and off. So activate that and just go through and find a switch that you want to use. Say, I might use the elevator dual rate switch because that's a convenient switch. There we go. So we're done. So I'm switching the elevator dual rate switch, which is this one here. That might be confusing. On other radios, you would have to use the elevator dual rate switch to operate the elevator dual rates, but on this radio, you can forget about the names of the switches. They're just for identification. You can do whatever you want with any switch. Now, we've got a little plus and an equals here, so let's just explain what that's about. That's called multiplexing. There we go, multiplex. So at the moment, we're adding that effect to the existing programming line. So as well as the rudder being operated by the rudder stick, it's also being operated by the elevator stick, and they add together. You can also choose multiply, which I don't understand, or replace. So replace means that it, if that switch is on, you are only operating the rudder using the aileron stick now. If it's add, you can use both of them and they add together. If it's multiply, they somehow multiply together. I don't really understand. So there are the three choices. Usually it's add, sometimes it's replace. Now we can go back to the display screen. There we go. That's the ailerons, that's the rudder stick. Now we'll flick the switch and you can see, flick the right switch and you can see now the other ailerons and the rudder are working together just using the aileron stick. So that's one of the possible mixes you could use. I'll get rid of that. So highlight in the menu, highlight it again to get the border, and then long press of exit gets rid of it.